Okay, welcome. I gotta turn this off here. Welcome. I gotta turn this off here. There we go. Technology, all the things that we have to learn as a dog trainer. Welcome everybody on the dog training and behavior community, such an original name. So let's talk dog. And guess what? I have my very, very, very dear friend and colleague joining us today from England. So, and I need to thank her for staying up to do this, but I think she's a night owl. So she's all cozy. I know it's chilly over there, right? You guys got some cooler weather. And yeah, so Anita is an awesome dog trainer over in England. And between the two of us, we have probably 40 years experience in training. Well, probably more than that, because then we have to add in our dog owning experience before we became trainers. So lots of experience. We are going to talk about multi-dog homes. Probably will go a little bit longer than the half hour, I'm guessing, because Nada usually and I usually have a lot to say. But if there's any questions, I'm going to check on my iPhone in the group. But we're just going to go over some basics, hopefully just some things for you to think about. Tips. We cannot solve all your issues just on a Facebook Live. And that's something that you always want to remember. If you do need professional help, training, or behavior, you really do want to reach out to somebody and have them work with you. You don't want to be racing all over the internet and Facebook groups and then maybe getting information that isn't good or not staying focused on a task. So Anita and I have the same methodology. We love to create fun in our dog. We also understand that dog training as a concept isn't like what many owners think. It's not obedience training. Obedience is pretty military. And we like to teach some life skill foundations. We like to use fun when we're training. And it's about teaching our dogs to be confident and wanting to engage with us and disengage the environment. That sometimes takes a while to work on. As both Anita and I both know, we have dogs that are not that great. And also thinking about their environment, which can be ever changing. And then, of course, we also need to think about who our dog is as far as genetics. Some of us have crossbreeds, some of us have pure breeds, some of us have a dog that's got two breeds, but their genetics does come into play. Dogs are not wolves, though. We need to remember that they're not wolves. They are dogs. They're definitely dogs, even though they share a lot of DNA. But there's some DNA that they do not share. And then, of course, always thinking about our dog's self, their body, previous experiences that may have traumatized them, and also their health. So, multi-dog households, are they easy? I'm going to let you answer them, Anita.
Right. First of all, thank you for inviting me. And it's always a pleasure to have a chat with you. I love chatting with you. Exactly for the reasons that you mentioned, that we are on the same concept of many things, and that we are upon the way and still just as if we were just neighbors and right next to each other. So is it easy to have a multi-dog household? Yes and no. I have had multi-dog household most of my life, and well, since I had dogs, and I got my first dog when I moved out from my parents when I was 24 years ago, and I don't want to tell you that how long ago it was, but we are talking on decades right now. And basically that little dog happened to be in a multi-dog household straight away because when she was just 3 months old and she was a little terrier, then my husband to be, we moved in together, and he had an Irish setter. And that's where I'm saying that it is easy. It can be as easy as it that was back at that time, because it went really, really smoothly. But I have to say that I have been really lucky. And then since then, with other dogs, we had German Shepherds, Caucasian Shepherds, Cane Corsairs, all the big guard and livestock breeds together. And we had to have some serious management put into place. So again, the dog training question answered, it depends.
Yes, that is absolutely. The more we know as dog trainers and the more experience we gain, it definitely does depend, because each dog is an individual, taking into consideration all those points that I mentioned in the beginning, what their learning has been to date, what their environment is, what their genetics are. Obviously, when you have guarding breeds, you are definitely going to need a little bit more management, because those genetics come out. If you've got a dog that's been bred with a guarding dog and a gun dog, don't be surprised if you see guarding behaviors, because now you have the genetics from 2 dogs. And then, of course, who they are. You talked about having a little terrier and then a big dog, which that is a huge size difference. But everything went really, really well. So I've had multi-dog households for most of my dog owning. And I do have to say that it does depend. I have had multi-dog households where they've been like peas in a pod, where they just everything flows so easily, not a lot of work. And then there are others that it just doesn't happen that way. The 2 dogs that I have now, they're good together, but I do have to be aware, because we've got 2 different personalities that are interacting with each other, that are living with each other. So, paying attention to what they're doing and what they're saying. And, that's something that as owners, we need to always try and figure out what our dogs are saying. I'm just going to go to the group here. So you mentioned about, Marguerite Foster just said, "Happy holidays, my friends." Hey, Marguerite, I'm just looking at the comments now. So you mentioned, whoops. Turn that down. Oh, and there's Kathy Konecki. Hello. And Heinrich, he says it's very cold in Sweden today. Even the polar bears are moving south. I doubt that, because we have polar bears in Canada, and I don't think it's cold where they live. So they live up in Churchill and wherever else. That's my home province. But what were we just talking about? Squirrels. See, what were we just talking about? Oh, just being aware and learning a dog language. A lot of times we hear people saying, "Oh, just let them work it out." And you may see some dogs get along nicely for a little bit, and then something happens, and owners will go to, "Oh, just let them work it out."
Oops.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, working out is never a good option, because I don't even know where actually it does come from, this whole working out sort of situation, because again, going back to that time, and I didn't even mention that right now I live in a household with 2 dogs. There are completely different personalities, completely different types of breeds, and it's full-time management with them, and it is And I would never, ever if I let them out, then one of my dogs would be dead. That's probably would be my toy poodle. So that's not really a good idea to let them work out. When I go back in time, and I'm going back like 15 years at least in time, when I had the Caucasian Shepherds, and they are the same breed and they are the same strength. And again, once dogs are what they practice. So if they practice to fight, if they practice to squabble, and then that just starts escalating because the other dog is just not listening, they are just not feeling being respected or being heard, and they will just talk back, or simply there are just communication problems between them two, because we are just, as humans, we haven't got the same social skills as individuals. And just imagine when you have a squabble with your work colleague and you just can't resolve it, that no matter what you say, whenever you say green, you are both talking about green, but one understands frog and the other one is talking about crocodile. So it's something like that between dogs, that they don't speak the same language. And these two Caucasian Shepherd girls, they were massive and they were very strong, and their fights would have become deadly. So on their second fight, I separated them, which again is an art, and do not separate dogs when they fight unless you know how to do it safely, especially not like between two giants. But they were both my dogs. And even when I was shutting the door on one of the dogs, I dragged one of the dog inside and shut the door on the other side. They were still holding onto each other's nose, the whole nose. So the half of the faces was just completely damaged. And then after that, we tried to put them into separate kennels. They were still fighting through the kennel. They still wanted to get to each other. So basically, I had to put them into completely two different properties. And they were happy as Larry until the end of their life, because they are working dogs. So they had a job to do. They had the big field to look after. They just had completely two separate fields. One was in the orchard, looking after the orchard, and the other one was looking after the house. So no, if I had let those dogs work out, it would have been just a tragedy.
So Heinrich asks, can there be different accents? And I'm not sure what he means by that, depending on
I don't know.
the breed. Anyway, yeah, and the thing to think about is sometimes, depending on the personalities, that first fight can and might be, again, it does depend in regards to behavior, because you're talking about individual personalities and beings, and that can start, that can just damage the relationship after the first time, so that they continually will fight. Now, for sure, some dogs, they just can't live together. There's some humans that just can't live together, and sometimes it takes a while to learn that. But the other point about that is, when we do have two dogs, now, were they the same age?
No.
Okay.
No,
So,
there was a big age difference between them.
okay. So what was the age difference?
One dog was over 10, very close to her retirement, and the other one was a young bitch, just like 2-year-old.
Yeah. So, and that's something that owners want to think about, because they don't, and that's okay. Because they're not, that's, if you're not a professional and trained in dog behavior and all that, we really do have to take into consideration when we're bringing in a new dog into a home where there's already a dog that might be older. And I'm not saying that it can't work. I've been in a situation where I have brought younger dogs into a home with an older dog, but that older dog, I knew, I knew what she was like with other dogs. Also, the thing to think about is not waiting to see for trouble to start. And I know it can happen, and I know it's happened to you, where maybe owners need to think about management more when they're bringing in a new dog into a home, and not just thinking, oh, they're just going to play and have fun, and which some do. And you also want to pay attention to what the puppy is doing to an older dog, depending on their personality. And I'm thinking about my younger dog compared to Emma. And he can be annoying. He's an annoying dog. And I can tell that he is annoying to Emma sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. They can be annoying. It again depends on the other dog's personality. Because when I think back of my first two dogs, the terrier and the Irish setter was he was 2.5 years old at that time, but he was just such a laid back, a good temperament he was a solid temperament of dog. And basically, he took on everything from the puppy. The little puppy was playing like the little kittens do, hanging at the end of his tail and playing with it. But the little dog was just looking up for guidance for the big dog. And I still bet until today that there are a lot of skills that actually that little terrier picked up from the big one, like walking on the street manners and stopping and sitting by the curb, because I never taught her to do that. And like loving the water, because she just wanted to go after the setter. Everything was the water for the setter. And so I had two dogs going down on the river of Danube. We were canoeing, and the two dogs were swimming just by the side of the canoe, and they were just absolutely loving life. So it depends on the dog's character. But when you've got two really strong personalities, like my Caucasian shepherds, and it wasn't a new relationship between them, so it wasn't that the older dog was just brought into, and that was a community of dogs, because we were taking in shelter dogs. So our dogs were changing quite a lot, because once we could find the right home for them, then they went to a right home. But with this dog, we thought that no, retired, they just didn't need her for work anymore. So it's just, we can just provide a good retirement age, whatever is left for her. There's 4 or 5 years or whatever. And yeah, it happened over resources, which for stocking guardians, it doesn't always need to be food. It can be just a precious place that they think it's just a precious place. So,
sure. Yeah, because resource guarding isn't just about food, is it?
Yeah, it's not. Resource is whatever they think is important for them. So what they perceive to be important.
Yeah.
So
Heinrich asks a really good question. I have my thoughts on that. And he's saying, so I guess he's clarifying his previous question about there being different dialects depending on the race or the breed. And I think that just goes back to, Heinrich, is the genetics, environment, previous learning. Because they're all, I mean, you can have 10 of the same breed. They're not going to be all the same. They're going to be very, very different. If they come from different places, that's going to have a huge effect. I mean, I've seen dogs from even the same litter, because they're all individuals, not just their personality, but even, there'll be dogs in the litter where that dog ends up shedding more than the other dog. So it, that's a physical thing, but every dog is an individual. And I think, as far as dialects to say, I think that has to do with how well the dog does speak dog, I will have to say. So, I mean, and yes, different breeds do have, because of their breeding, and we've bred for certain traits to be stronger, in certain dogs. So that's definitely going to have an impact if you're talking about two different breeds. But like I say, even within the same breed, you still have to go back to, where they came from, what their genetics are, even the same breed, like what breeder did they come from? Do we have good genes being passed on, bad genes being passed on? Those kinds of things that we need to look at. Did they come from stable parents? Did they come from healthy parents physically? Because then when we're getting into big dogs, we're also talking about, often, the bigger dogs tend to, because they're big, have, structural, they'll get arthritis easier in their joints because they are bigger. I mean, it happens to people that are really, really tall, right? Because they're carrying around more, just like dachshunds, they have a really long spine. Yeah. So, and he's also, if you have two dogs that require more individual attention than you only have one. Absolutely. No doubt about it. So, if you're getting a dog for the sake of your other dog, I always think that's the wrong thought. First and foremost, you need to want a second dog. Always. Always. It's you that needs to want to have the second dog. And then you need to determine whether your dog is suited to be with another dog. You might be looking at, and I've worked with many owners who they've got a very senior dog, and then they bring in a new dog, and it's really hard for them. And even if they think that, well, they did live with another dog at one point, but now that they're older, it's still harder.
Absolutely. It is. And even if you get the dog for the right reason, then you can still just bump into situations that you have never expected, just like as it happened with my toy poodle and my Staffy, because our first dog was the toy poodle, and he wasn't that old. He was like 4-year-old when we got the Staffy pup, and he was absolutely fine with other dogs. He had brilliant disengagement skills. Yes, I could have seen the signs that he never wanted to play with another dog. That actually, no, that will be something that he doesn't want. And at the moment, since they have been separated, and now I'm going back years in time, because that now they are 8 and 5. They are both absolutely balanced and healthy and happy the way they are living, and they have got their individual needs, and they all get completely separate type of activities, because that's what they enjoy, that's what they like. One loves being around people and loves being around busy places. The other one doesn't need that, because although she would love it, it just doesn't have a good effect on her. As she's getting older, she's getting better at it. But they are definitely not the dogs who want to play together with each other,
Right.
because it is just, so they are definitely not for each other. They are for us.
Yeah. But often owners, so not many pet owners would do what we would do.
Yeah.
Because you know that, and you understand that, and it works for you, and you guys make it work. Yeah, and some people just can't, and a lot of times it's not just one person that is, if there's more than one person in the household, everybody's got to be on the same page if we've got two dogs that need more management.
Yeah,
right?
it is absolutely a tough situation, and it depends on the family, depends on the household they live in, depends on the layout that is accessible for them, because providing management and separating two dogs and rotating their living space is definitely not an easy task, because with management, somebody will leave a door open, somebody will just forget about that. It happened to us so many times that the one dog was downstairs, and we just came home with the walk with the other dog and just let them into the lounge, and the two dogs met. But by that time, there was enough training in place that they just were completely indifferent to each other. So there was no issue. One just went out, the other went in. So, but there is serious training needs to be put in place, even with the management, especially getting prepared for those situations when things like this happen, and mistakes happen.
Yeah.
So
and that, bringing training into the situation, it's not just about having multi-dogs, is how much training and work have you done with the first dog? And then you need to put in the same amount of effort in the second dog. Now, I know you mentioned sometimes that's not necessarily, and I agree, I have had multi-dog homes where, the third one kind of like just learns and goes with the rest of the dogs, and they do learn from each other. Absolutely, they learn from each other. Sometimes they compete, sometimes they my two is fear of missing out. I did a little puzzle today. It was really, really interesting. And it was interesting in a good way, because the puzzle that I set up, it showed me all the impulse control training that I've done for both dogs, that the items that I use, they weren't willing to just go for it until I said, get it, which was awesome. And then even then they were unsure, and they always put their impulse control back, which is fine. I'm okay with that. And I let each dog have their turn. So one dog had to stay on a station or boundary while the other did it. And once, sometimes I make the judgment. And often, if I've given both an opportunity to interact, I will let both of them do it at the same time. And then the motivation went up because there was competition.
Yeah, exactly. That just creates arousal. And that's when we get to be on top of the things, when we can see the arousal changes. And that's why it is so important to educate all pet owners about the body language, the importance of the body language, because that's all sometimes, and arousal can change within milliseconds. And we are talking about terriers, where it is especially really fast. And they go from 0 to 100 just basically straight away. And that's when impulse control comes into place, and how much they can think in high arousal, that actually they can choose better choices. And they have got a choice of choices.
Yeah, really. It is a choice of choices. They can do A or they can do B.
Yeah, and they can choose that, no, I don't need to go for the fight. Actually, I can just turn my head away. I'm not happy about it. I will come for reassurance to my mom, and may whine and may jump up because I need to do something with my excitement, but I'm not transferring that excitement or frustration rather than excitement it is against the other dog, because that's when the fight might start. So it is teaching, and that's where training comes into place, when we can't think of the situations that can happen because there are just such a huge variety of situations. But what we can do is we can for sure shape the dog's brain and teach them these concepts that are essential life skills to be able to learn, to be able to make the right choices even, and think when they are in high arousal, and not just revert back to their breed specific answer, which with a Staffy, that will be a grab bite straight away. That's what they do. So it always goes back to what they show in aggression or in play, because they are basically exactly the prey drive shows exactly the same things. Then tolerance to frustration, that even if you are frustrated, you need to be patient, like taking in turns. That shows a massive skill or ability of tolerance to frustration, that I want to play with that, but I can wait. Yeah. And then there are many other skills that we can teach them. And when all these skills come together layer by layer, and we are upskilling them on top of the skills, that's when in real life they will show up, just as you mentioned in your situation. Yeah. And I love that example for this one.
And something to think about too, even though we've built all those layers, I mean, that is so helpful, because something that we need to remember is that behavior is always happening, and behavior can always be changing. We know it. We change our habits for whatever reason, good habits, bad habits, and it's not different than our dogs. And I actually have an example with the 2 dogs now, because they are very much fear of missing out, which has been something that I always have to train against, where Emma was always, I had her to a point when visitors came, she knew what to do. But because Liam is so bursts out, then Emma has the fear of missing out and the arousal erupts. But constantly having, those layers of training helping in that situation is helpful. That's not the example one I wanted to talk about, but so there's no leaves on our trees here. It's fall. We don't have snow where I am. Southern Ontario has a lot of squirrels. I hate them. I call them furry rat. There are a lot in Southern Ontario, because Southern Ontario do not have a lot of predators. So I noticed that one neighbor's tree, the squirrel nest got taken down, and I thought, whew, that was good. But then I noticed an uptake of squirrel activity. So they don't come in our yard. They've figured that out, but they run along the top of the fence. So now that the leaves are gone, I looked at my neighbor's big tree, and he's got 2 huge squirrel nests. Anyways, nonetheless. So Emma was more the squirrel chaser. That was her interest. And Liam never cared at all. So, and Emma's good. Like if we went on walks, she would leave squirrels alone, because she knew when we're on walks, it's none of your business. You can get a little bit of squirrel chasing at home. Well, Liam has started. And again, at 5 years old, he now starts chasing squirrels. It's a couple of reasons why. I think he had some discomfort, and we've addressed that. So I think he feels better running after them. But what's happened now is, because they're so competitive, when they were let out to go into the backyard to go do their business, they would start running and barking. And when they were both doing it, it was actually worse for Liam, because Liam is one of those dogs where you give him a millimeter and he takes like 5 yards. That is just his personality. And so now I've had to adjust, but because they have a lot of layers of training, I can now work through that. So, I am using, I guess you can call it management, where I'm not letting them both out at the same time, so that arousal isn't being pushed up. They're not practicing that. And so I will send one out and send them down and ask them to do their business, because both my dogs know potty words on cue. And then when I see everything calm, I'll send out the next dog. If I see any kind of body language that is telling me that even when I send the other dog out, there's arousal going, I have the luxury right now, there is no snow on the ground. So I can walk out there in my slippers onto the deck, and I will have them focused on me as we go down the stairs, so that I diffuse. And that's a behavior they understand. They understand when I'm walking with them to focus on me, even in the backyard, because I've practiced focus exercises, not just in the house, but on walks, and especially in the backyard, because we always have had squirrels. And I want my dogs to pay attention to me. Even the squirrels are jumping, like, yeah, okay, you're chasing them a little bit, but now I'm talking to you, and that they want to talk to me. So all those layers have already been built in, where now I can address a behavior that's starting. And I have clients that tell me that they're glad that they hear their trainer is having trouble. I wouldn't call it trouble. It's just, now I just have to do more training. That's all. It's, and it's not a big deal. I can do it. I'm glad, because if there was snow, I'd probably be less inclined. But anyway, and I already am seeing, because I'm doing that, I'm already seeing the arousal levels start to taper off in that situation.
And it's interesting when you mentioned that. I suppose it's of course it is management. Absolutely. In my mind, management is when we are not giving access to them to practice the behavior we don't want, and whatever the means or whatever the tools is. So it's not necessarily just a different room, a separate room, a baby gate, a crate, being on the lead, or a puppy line, because these are the management tools we mention most of the time. But exactly, just like, how can I lower that arousal? Because that behavior won't happen unless they are in high arousal. And it's funny when you said that, because I was using exactly the same tool, and that time probably we didn't even know each other. When Spraggan was just a puppy, a teenager sort of puppy, and Newton's been an only dog for God knows how long, for nearly 4 years. And with a little toy poodle just bouncing out into the garden and bouncing around, there is no problem with that at all. But when there is a Staffy and the toy poodle is bouncing around, that the chase instinct will come in straight away, and the Staffy will start grabbing at the neck, because that's what Staffies do. They just, terriers, just bang, oh, brilliant. And even it's a game, it is because of the height, not even height difference, but because they are not much difference in height in them, but just the strength and the different structure. Yes, exactly, with the stocky bully puppy and the tiny little vulnerable toy poodle, where the skin is just so thin. And that was mainly the issue all the time, that the skin is so thin and it can be punctured so easily, and the stuff is not even meaning to bite, just with the vehemence that they are just arriving at the other dog's skin. It just happens. So obviously, so the only way to stopping it was let Newton out, wait until the bouncing has stopped, Spraggan, it was a perfect time for her to prepare to learn some impulse control and wait. And yes, I had to put more management, like close the door and even put the lead on, or on her, or just do some focus exercises on me, really slow feeding, because of course I needed to lower the arousal, and I was practicing it without Newton being out in the garden as well, because otherwise it wouldn't have been working. And that way I could let her out and the chase didn't start.
Yeah.
So it didn't even start, because the chase was only triggered once the other dog started moving fast.
Yeah.
And once they were just mooching around, that was absolutely fine. And again, both dogs just focusing, and really good owner focus. That is.
Which is interesting, because a lot of times, you know, when we get asked as trainers about certain situations, or, you know, going to work with somebody and they hadn't really put training in, it's and I'm not saying that training is going to prevent, you know, certain emotional issues and stuff, but always thinking about, even when, you know, I mean, for sure, when you're bringing a puppy into the home, or even an older dog, is you want to prevent the rehearsal of behaviors. Chase is a pretty big one. And I think Kathy was mentioning, you know, the dog they've taken in a new dog and it's chasing squirrels, so it's become an issue. So, but what's happening is now it's getting transferred to chasing the cats, and then it can transfer to moving cars, where, you know, sometimes I'm working with owners and they'll say, oh, I guess I shouldn't have taught my puppy to chase the squirrels. You know, you're letting the genie out of the bottle there, because you really do want to be careful about what they start practicing, and it can spread to other things. It does put them in hyperarousal, it adrenalizes them, and that's not the brain space that we really want them to be in as a pet owner. Or I don't think I want any dog to be in that brain space all the time. So but management helps prevent, and management can help you train. So
yeah,
in my situation, I don't need to use a leash to take my dogs down, because I've done so much training. I've done so much focus exercise. They know when I walk out with them, they pretty much will stay with me. If they're not, I just have to start marking every little piece of good behavior that they're giving me, because they understand that language so well. They just, you know, I'm able to do that. And, you know, sometimes we need to use a leash. So if I wasn't getting their focus the way I wanted to with my training, and I do understand, as trainers, we do know how to break things down so that we do get the behaviors we want. That's why you want to work with people like us, is because we do know how to break those down. But, you know, then I would go to a leash, and I was already contemplating that. I thought, oh, you know, now I need to get them on a leash, but I did use management and it's working. If it didn't work, then, you know, I switch gears. So, and I'm already seeing it getting better. I'm not ready to send them. Well, actually in the morning, they're a little bit better now when I send them out for their first pee. So, but usually they're focused on peeing first thing in the morning. Sometimes Emma goes and she is the instigator, because she'll start barking. She can't even see anything. That was another habit that she started, I think, that really facilitated the arousal, is she would just run out there. There was nothing there. She would just start barking. It's like, get out of here. I'm here. If you're here, I'm chasing you. So it's funny, but, you know, anyways, and it, you know, it started now that all the leaves are gone. So
yeah, and it's good that you're mentioning barking, because that's what I was thinking, that another issue that can arise in multi-dog households, barking, because barking just spreads like wildfire. So one dog starts it, and even the dog before that never used to bark, that starts barking as well. And because it used to happen with us back when Spraggan was little, that Newton's always had this alert barking when something happened. He always had the woo 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 woo, and then he stopped. So I never really trained it out of him because it wasn't disturbing. It stopped basically straight away, and otherwise he's not a barky dog because I don't do barking at home. I can't deal with barking dogs. So barking for me is communication. I learned it from my stock guardians. They are basically mute dogs. If there is barking, then I know something is happening. So I just don't do barking with little dogs, especially not with the high pitch voice. But that was allowed for him because he's a dog and he loves hearing his voice. So at least something is allowed for him. Anyway, Spraggan picked up this habit that the postman came, or when Newton just perceived that something was happening outside on the road and he started just barking, then Spraggan started barking. So actually that was a time when I needed to address that issue. And how do you address that issue? Well, I didn't start it with Newton because the longer a dog, at least that was my thought process, and just let me know if you would think it other way, because there is always more than one way to do things. So my thought process for this was, I'm not starting with my older dog, because the longer you practice a behavior, the better you become at it, and the longer it will take to train out that behavior from the dog. With a young dog, this behavior just started. So there is no learning history, at least there is not a long learning history with it. The dog is just going because it is just fun. Probably she likes hearing her voice and shouting, because it probably, barking is rewarding. It is rewarding in itself. And so anyway, it was really easy to teach her. So that's enough. Oh, thank you. And basically just teaching the dog to stay quiet and to stop barking, and rewarding the quiet. So that worked really, really well. So, and then if you want to, then of course you can start the training with the other dog, which in my case is not an issue because he's not a barker. So I don't, and now we are at that state that even when he starts barking at the postman, the little one, the Staffy, she puts her head up, but she doesn't join in the barking itself. She barks at other things, but she's not joining in anymore, because that training was just so strong in her that basically whenever Newton was barking, she got rewarded. So basically her attention comes to me when Newton is barking, but she doesn't join the barking.
Yeah, that's excellent. Yeah, I mean, for sure, the longer you're practicing the behavior, the harder it is to undo. So starting with the dog that hasn't practiced it for as long, I mean, that's natural learning. You can even call it overlearning, right? Because if you've practiced it so long, a lot of times you don't even need to think about doing it. It just happens, right? That's overlearning. So yeah. Thankfully I only have one barker, and again, behavior is always changing. So since they started doing the squirrel stuff, I noticed because he does alert for people at the door and postman. It's something that he has to do. And usually I just thank you, and then he stops a lot of times. And I do have to watch now because his barking has gotten louder. So we have to do some remedial training with that. So you see how behaviors can bleed into other places. And thankfully, Emma is a quiet dog, even though she is a terrier. I mean, people say, oh, all small dogs are barkers. And it's like, well, not really, not all of them. But anyway, so I have to do a little bit of training. Often he will come and look for me because I've just said thank you. And he comes to tell me that, he barks and he comes to me. And he usually goes on the boundary. So I tried stopping him from barking, and it's just, he has to let us know if somebody's put a parcel on our front door. And that's fine. I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
It's just that now the behavior is getting worse. So now I have to train. And because he's got so much training history, it's easier to change his behavior.
Yeah.
So
And it's, again, I just love that you mentioned that I'm okay with that. So if, because I get to ask so many times that, is it good or is it bad to train the dog? I said, it's up to you. What do you want? What do you want your household to look like? What do you want your family life to look like? Don't ever let anybody tell you whether your dog is rude or good or naughty behaviors. It's only up to you and what we want them to be trained. So for example, with you barking at the door yeah, that's absolutely fine. For me, barking, the little one barking when the postman comes, it's fine, but I'm not taking it from my Staffy.
yeah,
Although what I am taking from her, she can charge at the door. I don't mind that. But instead of tearing up the pose that she used to be as a pup, oh my God, now she's picking up the letters or taking it out from the door and retrieving it to me.
cool. Love it.
And yeah, and there is no tearing up, so it's a good, she can still grab it, she can still do and do the running for it, but she's not allowed to go away and tear it up, but she's retrieving it to hand, and then, or sometimes just drops it in front of me, depends on how not focused she is. And but because the arousal still goes high, so we still need to go with that flow, that how high is the arousal. So
Yeah.
we always get to take it into consideration that what breed are we dealing with and what arousal levels.
Yeah. And their personality. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah, yeah,
Liam
yeah,
is a
exactly,
very,
the personality as well,
he
obviously,
is
yeah.
a hyper personality. He's very sensitive. So I try to get him to stop barking for alert barking. But there's some dogs that just, they need to do that. They just need to do it. As long as they know that I'm aware and now you can stop barking. So all right, well, we're almost coming up on the hour and it's late in England. Anita's got to get to bed, but I'm really happy that she has joined us. And hopefully this has been helpful for you as dog owners. Even some tidbits for single dog homes. I think the main message there is training, 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 training. And, for you that have multi-dog homes, multi-dog conflicts can be quite serious and scary and very upsetting. I know, I'm the type of trainer that I provide information so that owners can make their own decision. There are times when I have said, like, you need to do something else. I try and get owners to come to that conclusion themselves. And I have had clients where they've realized this isn't working. I can't do this. Especially for newly adopted dogs. And that's another consideration as well is, a newly adopted dog and where did they come from and what their history is, which is, important, but management will always be your friend whenever you bring in a new animal into the house. So, okay, good, Kathy. I'm glad that whatever we were discussing has been helpful. And like I say, we have discussed some things that are between 2 dogs or 3 dogs, and also just, the underlying message is training is always going to help you through struggles, and having the many, many layers. And so people kind of look at me funny when I say layers of training. And by that, it's simply, really communicating with our dogs and for them to understand concepts and, many different concepts so that we can put them together like a puzzle. Or look at it as a pyramid. where we have some foundation skills and we just keep building and building and building. You can't get to the top if you haven't started at the bottom.
Yes, absolutely. And also, yes, we were talking about multi-dog households, but now just as I'm looking at my cat, the cat is sitting, lying there, and the dog was just spending the whole time on her bed,
Well, there she
chewing,
is. Yeah.
chewing her chew. And I remember times when there were serious training happening with chasing the cat away from my food, chasing the cat away from everything and trying to kill the cat. And now they just can cohabit just absolutely fine like this, even when there is a precious chew. And that's why I had to stand up, because the chew went down to that small, and instead of her trying to swallow it, I just gave her some I just swapped it for something else, and she was absolutely happy with the swap. She said, yeah, that's a good deal. So
Good.
so yeah, so it's the same with interspecies.
Yes.
And not.
Yes, absolutely.
So yeah, so if you have got any questions about the management, because it's not even the training part is the easy. Sometimes it's tricky to get the management in place.
Yeah.
And what with the training, it's just breaking down into really small pieces, what to practice and how to build the layers upon layers.
Yeah.
So that's where a good training plan comes in place.
Yeah. Yeah, management is hard. It's not always easy. And I do see pet owners are really struggle with that concept. But anyways, this has been lovely, Anita, and I thank you very much for joining me. We have to get together again.
Having me.
And and pick another topic for us to talk about, but that's been hopefully helpful for everybody. So I want to thank you and have a good sleep. I'm going to